everybody, Dr. Rick Wallace dropping in on you right now. Leaving the office, about to run and grab one of the youngins and run a couple errands with them. It's been a real busy day, kind of crazy, but got some things done. Look, again, we really need your support. Look in the description box, click the link, or give by way of our Cash App account. Also, another way that you can support us is by clicking the like button, sharing it, and subscribing. Now, moving on. I've been talking about some topics that I think are important and relevant. I think that there are things to learn from them. Anybody who has followed me for any stretch of time knows that I'm not real big on the sensationalism. I have a personality that could play on it real big. My wife teases me a lot. She said, man, if those people actually knew how crazy you are and thrown off you are, in a fun way she's talking about, it will blow their mind because all they see is a serious side of you. And, some of you who know me know. Those of you who have spent time with me have seen me in other environments. But when I'm dealing with, the well-being of my people, when I'm dealing with everything that my people are going through, it's a serious matter to me, and I take it serious. Don't think for a second that I don't have my times. I smile, I have fun, I spend time, I have to. I got this one life to live, and I live it to the fullest. So I'm not off all day long with my Malcolm face on. That's not what it is, but I take what I do seriously. It means a lot to me. And, so I don't do the sensationalized stuff. Now if it's a hot viral topic and it's something to be learned from it, yeah, I'm in. I'm ready to do that. Because those are the things that matter. That's why I'm here. But I try to stay on things that have substance, things that carry weight, things that, if engaged, can literally make a difference. It's not easy because people don't want to hear that. People don't want to see that. People don't want to spend time to get to the meat of issues. They want to be fed quickly. And they want something that makes them feel good, not something that challenges them. And that is one of the major issues we have. But anyway, on top of everything else we've been talking about this week, one of my clients, who also happens to be a subscriber, hit me up and brought up the fact that the American Psychiatric Association has determined that the immigrants who were held at the border during the Trump administration suffered from psychological trauma, emotional trauma, and it has been detrimental, and that the psychological trauma was at the hands of the U.S. government. Now the Biden administration is talking about giving each one of the people who were victims of this, where families were separated, children were left alone. I mean, it was not what I would want to be associated with treating someone a certain way. Not even going to pretend that I'm not going to play that role. I'm not a person who believes that the only way to get my point across is to ignore the plight of everyone else. No, it was crap. But first and foremost, let's remember, it didn't start with Trump. Let's not do that. It got highlighted by Democrats during Trump's administration, but that stuff started way back in the Obama administration, at least, that I'm personally aware of. So that's the first thing. But let's go back and a little bit further and then move up to this. So, my client was, pointing out the fact that the American Psychiatric Association made this assessment, and that quickly the Biden administration is talking about giving this money to these immigrants or those who were trying to immigrate here. And the point that this client made was that we have 100 years of psychological trauma piled up and passed down and through multiple means of multi-generational transmission of trauma, but be it epigenetics, be it social learning theory, be it re-experiencing, be it re-injury, and we still haven't stopped experiencing it if we're going to be honest about it. And yet nothing, they want to tell us that we'll put a group together to research and study whether or not blacks should receive reparations. And that was by a Jamaican-born congresswoman by the name of Sheila Jackson Lee, which is absolute trash. And I don't normally speak about blacks, especially black women, that way, but trash. Has done nothing but rape and pillage poor communities in Houston and make all kind of promises. And because we go all out, sell all out, and go crazy behind Democrats, and this is a Democrat, woman. So that, oh my God, made a career out of making promises that haven't been kept. Now that's the way of the politician. We're gonna promise a lot, deliver a little, because we don't want to piss off anyone that has the ability to cause problems. So we make promises, we don't keep it, but we keep our hand in the coffers of big corporations. We keep our hand in the coffers of major campaign contributors. We keep our hand in the coffers of those who keep our career going. We consistently give ourselves raises while talking about there's no money for programs. We do all kind of crazy stuff that makes us politicians. We do very little real politicking, but we're politicians. And so anyway, we got people like that, Sheila Jackson Lee, and the bull crap that goes on with her and her long tenure in Washington, D.C. But what you got to understand here with this stuff like this here, and you compare it, okay, since 1619, we've been catching hell on this land. And we were promised 40 acres and a mule, and as the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has said, that was just one of many promises unfulfilled. And they have made many and yet to fulfill any. And very few people are bold enough to talk about it in a way that truly sheds light, because everybody is more in a line with not shaking things up, because everybody still wants to eat. And as the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said, we need men with testicular fortitude who have no problem calling a spade a spade. So what we have to understand here, this is nothing but political banter. This is nothing but political play. They made sure that during the Trump administration that they highlighted this. Now, they have manipulated the American Psychiatric Association. Well, you really don't have to manipulate it. Any asshole with a semester of psychology can tell you that the people who experience what happened at the border is suffering from psychological trauma. Don't need the American Psychiatric Association to say that. To be totally honest, any idiot that has any understanding of human behavior and how it's impacted by environment, how it's impacted by experience, and all of the other things that's basic psychology understands that. So we know that you can go to anybody and get them to say that there was psychological trauma. So what happens is they solicited the opinion of the American Psychiatric Association, knowing what the conclusion would be. Now what they're saying this. All of this happened under the Trump administration, and Biden's coming to the rescue. This is Democrats being Democrats. This isn't about the health and well-being of the people at the border. This is, now, I would doubt very seriously that $450,000 or $475,000 to go to each person impacted is probably never going to land in their hands. It is a discussion, and it will be some kind of way at the end of the day that the Republicans blocked it, or it was, stopped along partisan lines, and that's going to be the argument. But what it does is it puts up the facade that Dems care about the underdog. Well, Dems have actually been shitting on the underdog for quite a while. Matter of fact, no matter how much you want to hate Republicans, Dems have caused way more damage to the black community than Republicans have. Nobody's our friend, don't get me wrong. We don't have any friends in Washington. But don't ever think for a second that the Republicans are a greater threat to black progress than the Dems. The Dems have had our vote at a rate of 90% per election cycle for 50 plus years. Ever since the Civil Rights Bill was passed, we've been showing up and giving them 90%, almost close to 100% the last time. Because at least they weren't Trump. But it was under the Johnson administration that programs that Daniel Patrick Moynihan told them would be highly destructive to the black family were implemented and put into play. It was under the Johnson administration that many housing projects and housing programs that created and manifested super ghettos it was law writing and bill writing by now President Biden, Senator Biden in the 70s, that blocked busing of blacks to schools that would have put them in an environment to get, quote unquote, a better education. It was again Biden writing law as a mentee of Strom Thurmond, probably one of the most acknowledged and recognized racists that's ever walked the annals of the Capitol, that went along with the tough on crime, war on crime rhetoric that the Republicans were pushing way back in the 80s. And it was definitely Biden during the Clinton administration that stood up and wrote the crime bill that literally decimated the black community, that made a disparity between crack cocaine and powder cocaine, that gave those who were caught with, addicted to, using or selling, whatever, crack cocaine, far more heavier and weightier sentences than those doing the same with powder cocaine. And we know, anybody who knows anything about the street, anything about crime, criminality, penology, knows that crack was a poor people's version of cocaine, and predominantly blacks and some brown people were caught up in that crack epidemic. We know that Wall Street was flooded with that powder stuff where white people were using it and were getting slaps on the wrist for actually using something that was in a purer, more potent form. And that was again under the Clinton administration. What am I trying to say here? Am I saying vote Republican? No, I'm not here to talk about voting. I'm here to talk about the fact that we've got to wake up and understand that the right wing and the left wing belong to the same bird. We've got to wake up and understand that we don't have friends in Washington. We need to create allies. Allies are created from a position of power and exchange. In order to get allies, you got to have something to offer the ally that makes it advantageous for them to be on your side, to sit up and work towards your interests. We've got to learn the importance of political science. We have proven over the course of the last 150 years, if given the opportunity, we can thrive in the world of finance. We have, in many instances, mastered many components of economic science. We can look at Rosewood, we can look at Tulsa, we can look at Wilmington, North Carolina, we can look at Slocum, Texas, we can look at East St. Louis, we can look at certain areas in Chicago. We can look at all of these places where we thrived. We created enclaves where we bounced our dollars and recirculated our dollars. We can look at and say we did that, but we didn't understand political science. We didn't know how to insulate ourselves from outside interferences by creating political allies. We didn't understand military science of how we needed to structure our communities to protect our communities from outside progressions and encroachments. We didn't understand that, and it cost us dearly each and every time, because while we were advancing in one area, we didn't understand how to protect it. And your money and your power is only as potent and fluid as it can be defended, and that's something that we have to learn. So what we've got to understand is they're never going to afford us or give us reparations in the way that we see it, because you can't get anybody to sit up and say that spending some years at tops in the environment that the immigrants spent at the border, and again, I'm saying it's horrific, but I'm saying, number one, it doesn't compare to 400 years. It doesn't compare in the level of intensity and suffering. We're talking about mutilated people snatched out of a country and transported to another land, having their name taken from them, having their spirituality taken from them, having their history taken from them, having someone else's idea and identity inculcated into their psyche and pushed into their being, then being mutilated, raped, killed, family separated, and this happened consistently until once the transatlantic slave trade stopped. That just stopped the transport, the open transport. Let's be very clear. That stopped the open transport of slaves coming from the west coast of Africa. What it didn't stop was the current state of slavery, chattel slavery in the West, specifically the brutal chattel slavery that was taking place in the U.S., what will become the U.S., and it did not stop the breeding and growing of slaves from that. I did an interview on a radio program this morning, and I had a white engineer that was working that program that wanted to ask me a question afterwards, and the question was, you used the phrase free labor. So how much did it cost to acquire a slave? I said, from my research, anywhere from $400 on average, $400 up to over $1,000 in some instances, depending on gender, age, physical health, physical strength, and so many more variables. It varied. He said, so is it really free labor? And again, semantics, play on words. And for a person who doesn't think critically, someone would be stumped. For someone who has literally been studying this and thinking about this forever, I've engaged this 30 years ago. So it wasn't new to me. I said, okay, let's look at it. Say you go out and you spend $400 on a slave. First and foremost, you've got to get past the idea that you think you have a right to buy another human being. So now you have to sit up and say that although you spent $400 on an individual person, did you have the right to do so? So does that constitute anything? Now that you've spent that money on that person, and now you're having them work Are you paying them? No. So then again, it's free labor because they are laboring for free. Free labor isn't about whether you paid for something. It's did you pay the person who did the labor. But no, it goes further than that. So you got to be able to think and you got to be able to understand, because this is how you actually come to the solution too. This isn't about winning an argument, because he didn't ask you in an argumentative tone. He actually asked from a position of, I don't support slavery. I don't think it should have happened, but I'm curious to how you justify saying it. So here it is. And he said, you make a very valid point, but I wasn't finished. I said, let me finish. I said, okay, so number one is you're not supposed to own a person in the first place. It's a person. Number two, just because you bought the person don't mean you paid the person. You paid someone else for the person, someone else who didn't have a right to sell the person. But we're going past that. Let's just say, for argument's sake, that you had the right to buy him. Now, so you spend $400 on him. So you have a $400 investment in them. So at some point, that slave earns you more than what you spent on them. Now, what are you going to do about it? You've invested in them. They brought you back beyond your investment. Did they get anything for it? Were they rewarded for it? Could you say that, okay, I had a right to own you, but now you've actually earned me more than I paid for you? You know, have you purchased your freedom? Can I at the very least pay you your freedom? Can we say that you had an indebtedness to me of servitude until I bought you your freedom? Now, how I should be indebted to you because you took me from my land, brought me over to a new land, and are subsequently setting me free into an environment that's more than likely hostile to me, and changed completely the complexion of my life forever. But yeah, okay, I'm not even getting that. You're going to hold me, and here's where it really starts to get crazy. You spent $400 on me. Over the course of my life, if I'm healthy, I'm going to get with someone of the opposite sex, and we're going to procreate. Might not even be the same person because you was breeding and you didn't allow or respect marriage, as in some other places that had slavery. Didn't respect it. There was no obligation to honor the right of marriage. So you splitting up families and everything. But over the course of the life of this healthy slave, they're going to give you probably 4 generations. Their kids, their kids' kids, and their kids at least. So you've gotten your investment multiplied times a minimum of 3. And most of the time, they're going to have multiple kids. So you're talking about maybe 7 or 8, 9, 10 times the individual that you invested for one individual for, because they were born into slavery, so they were born into your ownership. You didn't have to pay for them when they were born. So you automatically got this. So this person not only worked their entire life, they created other slaves for you who worked their entire life. And you're talking about that wasn't free labor. The idea that someone would actually think that way, you know, is absolutely thrown off. But like I said, be very clear that there are so many different ways where it's just wrong, and there's no way to get around it. This all came from the conversation about CRT, critical race theory, and why everybody's flipping out about it. And my thing is, bottom line, you have not paid your debt. You know, and every time we get to talking about this on a serious note, things start to happen. You know, everybody was cool with Martin when he was talking about a dream. Everybody was cool with Martin when he was sitting up talking about, you know, integrating and moving in. Why? Because they were going to benefit from that. They're going to benefit from the integration. Yeah, that's more dollars coming in. That's less black people owning their own businesses and spending money in our businesses. That's exactly what happened too. We sold things we owned. We owned our own cleaners, our own shoe stores, our own shoe repairs, our laundry mats. We owned movie theaters, cab companies, and buses, and so many other things. And we sacrificed so much of that to be able to patronize white businesses so that we could feel that we belonged. That alone speaks to psychiatric trauma. You gave up ownership to be accepted in somebody else's when you had your own. But that comes from the idea that whites are superior. That comes from a level of self-hate that says, I would rather give up what I own to be accepted by someone else who doesn't want me around. That is a level of dysfunction and toxicity that you can't possibly imagine, but it comes from a broken psyche. There's a level of psychosis there. That's what I talk about in Born in Captivity, Psychopathology as a Legacy of Slavery. I talk about that. But to go back and talk about what's going on here, this is all political play. You got to understand that this is not about 90% of what's happening in politics and talked about in politics has absolutely nothing to do with actual things that are going to be done. It's about convincing people of a narrative. And most of the time, the narrative isn't true. The narrative is what they need you to believe to consistently buy into the system. If you really want to know the truth, they push voting so much, not because of getting the right person in office, not because you much rather love to have a Democrat than a Republican, or a Republican than a Democrat. No, you're going to end up in pretty much the same place. How you get there may be different depending on how they do it, but you're going to end up in the same place, and the average person isn't going to win this thing because it's not designed for them. You know what voting is? Voting is the litmus test for whether or not the masses still believe that the system works. Because if I can get you to come out in masses, that means you still think that if your candidate wins, you're going to get something, so you still believe in the system. The problem is to them when the voter turnout consistently drops. They know then that people aren't buying in, that people don't believe in the system. And eventually, when people stop believing in the system, people start looking for alternatives. And that's where the problem comes in. That's where revolution begins. And so they are always looking for ways to keep you interested, to keep you in the game, to keep you cheering for your champion. And what you find is there's a consistent turnover in champions. The Democrats don't consistently win. The Republicans don't consistently win. Why? Because we got to keep both sides thinking they got a chance. So we just keep flipping it, and we keep moving. And the whole goal isn't even anything about what's going on local and state levels as much as it is what's going on the geopolitical and global level. And that's how they play the game. And so what we have to be aware of is what we are going to do as individuals, as families, and as communities, and as most importantly a race. We need to be seriously considering how we are going to respond to our needs. What are we going to do about what's important to us? How are we going to meet our needs? That is where we need to be focused. We need to not be worrying about what is being promised to the immigrants. Do we need to apply pressure about that money they owe us? They need to run us our money. Oh, most definitely. I'm never going to let them off the hook about that, but I'm not going to sit around and wait on it, because see, sitting around and wait on what someone owes you is how you end up broke. Because just because it's yours don't mean you're going to get it in the time frame that you should. So what does that mean? That means that you need to be making moves to put yourself in a position to where you don't need them. Because the moment you get to where you don't need them, you actually have the power to leverage against them to make them give it to you. And that's where they've constantly kept us, is this idea of we need them. We've been constantly kept in that place where we need them. They got to give us this. We got to get this. They need to do this for us. No, we need to do for ourselves. On that note, I'm going to get off of here. And you guys have an unbelievable day. And I'm going to try to drop in and talk to you guys some more, maybe a little later on after I leave the gym. But you guys have a great day. I'm out.